Good afternoon and welcome. I'm John Coatsworth, Dean of the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this first lecture in the Leaders in Global Energy series, the centerpiece of a new initiative launched by SIPA to identify solutions to the challenge of creating sustainable energy while protecting the environment and reaffirming corporate citizenship. Our speaker today is Nobuo Tanaka, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. But before introducing him, I would like to thank EDP-Energias de Portugal for the support which makes this series possible. EDP, as you know, is one of Europe's leading electricity operators. Its interests in conventional and renewable power extend across 11 countries on 4 continents, including the United States. SIPA is pleased to be able to partner with this forward-looking enterprise in exploring the future of one of the great issues facing the global community today. The Leaders in Global Energy series consists of formal lectures and informal talks by distinguished leaders in energy from around the world and across the government, corporate, and NGO sectors. In addition to tonight's talk, SIPA will host in the coming months talks by Fatih Birol, Chief Economist at the International Energy Agency, Andris Pilbaks, European Commissioner for Development, and Carlos Tavares, Vice Chairman of Renault-Nissan. Please check the SIPA webpage for more details on these upcoming events. I also wish to thank SIPA visiting Professor Manuel Pinho, who you see sitting just to my left. Professor Pinho is the former Portuguese Minister of Economy and Innovation. He served as the director of the European Investment Bank and as an economist at the International Monetary Fund prior to assuming his ministerial position. On August 9th, 2010, the New York Times ran a front-page story examining Portugal's global leadership in transitioning to renewable energy and noted that Pinho, quote, largely masterminded the transition. In fact, I think Elizabeth Rosenthal, the author of this brilliant piece in the New York Times, is here today. Professor Pinho has also been the driving force behind this lecture series. In Portuguese, you would call him the intellectual author. Pardon me, I'll turn off my cell phone. It is Professor Pinho's deep knowledge, as well as his energy and enthusiasm, that have made today's talk, and indeed our Leaders in Global Energy series, possible. He will moderate the question and answer session that will follow Mr. Tanaka's remarks. And now to our speaker. Nobuo Tanaka began his career in 1973 at the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Tokyo. This is the ministry that's affectionately known as METI. He has extensive national government and international experience within METI, at the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C., and in the OECD. He first joined the OECD in 1989 as Deputy Director of the Directorate for Science, Technology, and Industry, and was promoted to Director in 1992. In 1995, he returned to METI and served in a number of high-ranking positions, the most recent being Director General for the Multilateral Trade System Department in the Trade Policy Bureau. In this role, he led many trade negotiations under the aegis of the World Trade Organization. In the energy field, Mr. Tanaka has accumulated vast experience. He was responsible for Japan's involvement with the IEA and the G7 energy ministers meeting during the second oil crisis in 1979, which all of you, of course, will remember was even more serious than the first oil crisis of 1973, when industrial nations were faced with a 300% to 400% increase in the price of crude oil in a relatively short period of time. In the late 1980s, he participated in establishing Japan's comprehensive energy policy, and he oversaw the implementation of Japan's international nuclear energy policy and led negotiations on bilateral nuclear agreements. He helped to coordinate Japan's domestic environment policy and energy policy in the third Kyoto Conference of Parties negotiations, which, as you know, led eventually to the Kyoto Protocols. He was Minister for Industry, Trade, and Energy at the Embassy of Japan in Washington from 1998 to 2000. Mr. Tanaka took over as Executive Director of the International Energy Agency of the OECD in September of 2007. In this position, he has emerged as one of the world's most serious, far-sighted, and clear-headed analysts of global energy issues. It is a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Tanaka to SIPA and to Colombia.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, and I really thank Mr. Pino for inviting me to talk to you all. Yes, we work together in our, energy field. When I started energy, career in the IEA, Minister Pino is the most respected and innovative and dynamic minister I ever see. So you are lucky to have him here and to innovate you. Yes, as Dean explained to you, my career back at Japanese government, I spent a lot of days outside of the country. So in that sense, half of my career in the ministry is outside of Japan, and it's very unusual for the Japanese career official. On the other hand, that gave me a great opportunity to see the world and global issues, and that gave me the opportunity finally to head this International Energy Agency. When I joined METI, it is 1973, the first energy crisis happened. And when I moved in the METI to the energy sector, who is dealing with the energy issues, international energy issues, it was 1979, and the second energy crisis happened. So when I got the job in IEA, many people told me that, hey, Mr. Tanaka, if you move again to the international energy sector, you may invite the third oil shock. And it happened. In 2008, you remember that oil prices went up to $147 per barrel. And it was really serious oil shock for many countries. But this gives you a good, I would say, thought about now we have to seriously think about the energy security issues much more than before, because this may lead us to the very difficult age of how we can reconcile this energy security together with climate change issue, sustainability issue. But we are saying this is not conflicting issue. We say this is the, mutually supportive issue in our discussion. So I try to convince you by using our recent publication called this Energy Technology Perspective 2010 to you and discuss about climate change, but also energy security issues. Let's move our slide. And we are created, as I said, in 1974 in the first oil shock, in the Arab embargo of the oils. We are created by Henry Kissinger when he was the Secretary of State as a counterbalance, power balance to OPEC, oil-producing countries. We are the consumer countries union and holding 90 days of net import of strategic stockpile of oil and use it in case of emergency. We used this tool twice in the history. In 1991, when the first, crisis or desert or Gulf War happened, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we mobilized this tool. Second time, it was 2005, when Hurricane Katrina and Rita hit Gulf of Mexico. We mobilized again 2 million barrels per day of the release collectively. So our concern is energy security. But now this energy security means a lot to the sustainability, because best way of securing your supply is not using energy. So energy conservation, efficiency in the demand side measures are very much important for us. Of course, to move away from oil, we have to use coal, we have to use gas, we have to use renewables, we have to use nuclear power. So diversifying sources of energy helps a lot of energy security. But except coal, it helps the CO2 emission reduction. So our projection or our analysis is the real input to the climate change negotiators these years. It was not the case 2-3 years ago. Nobody wants to talk about energy or for example, nuclear power or carbon capturing and storage, because these technologies are considered not sustainable. But now, without these technologies, simply CO2 emission reduction is impossible. So dialogue between environment policymakers and energy policymakers are very much lively and cooperative and talking together in the same language. That kind of dialogue is happening. And this is a big change in these years. Let's move to the next slide in showing there are plenty of security issues, not only oil, as I said. The blackout of electricity is certainly the very much of the energy security issues, which had happened in the United States a couple of times already. The gas security is a serious issue. In Europe, when the gas supply was disturbed through Ukraine, then the sustainability or stability of the supply was questioned from Russia. How can we do that? Can we have the strategic stockpile of gas? But it's very costly than the oil. So certainly IEA's role is expanding not only oil to gas, gas to electricity, and we are moving toward more comprehensive energy security. And to make this comprehensive security possible, we have to talk to not only IEA member countries. We are only OECD developed economies. The major economies, emerging economies now consuming quite rapidly expanding their consumption of energy. So without engaging these major players outside IEA, we cannot really secure the source of supply in the future. So these are the challenges for me. How can we make our international organization IEA relevant in the future, not only now but in the future? This is the challenge as an executive director of this organization. Let me move toward what is this energy technology perspective means. 2 years ago, we publicized this book, and we called on the energy revolution is necessary. Is this energy revolution happening? But what we need to do, what kind of technology we need, where we have to invest, and how much? We try to answer these questions. And are we seeing some of the changes which we want to see more? We call it green shoot. Are green shoot happening? This is another question which we try to answer. Let's move quickly this book. This is what would happen from now to 2050 if baseline energy consumption will look like. We have certain serious trend in 2009 because of the economic crisis. But after 2009, 2010, 11, the recovery is now happening. If business as usual, no government is not taking serious policy, the primary energy demand will grow by 84% from now to 2050. That is a baseline, the 4 slides, a 4-bar chart to the left. And you can easily see where the growth happens. because economic growth is almost double in non-OECD countries compared to the OECD. So most of the energy demand growth happens in these areas, and mainly from coal. This is another interesting feature because coal is cheap and abundant. China, India is using lots of coal for the energy source, but it is very CO2 intensive. So can this really change to the more cleaner or less intensive way of use? That is a technological challenge, policy challenge. OECD countries' energy demand will not grow. It's already, for example, in oil, it's already peaked in 2005 and it's now declining. So how can we, if we have the policies, we have to engage not only our members, but other members also. That is our challenge. Next chart. We try to develop the alternatives. We call it blue map scenario. Maybe some of you are quite familiar with our document called World Energy Outlook, which is annual flagship publication. We call it 450 ppm stabilization scenario. Basically, it means to reduce CO2 emission by half from now to 2050, which is a scenario which IPCC or UNFCCC, the climate negotiators, are aiming at. What would be the scenario? What kind of technology is necessary to achieve that? That is what we try to answer. The CO2 emission will almost double, but by this 450 scenario, we halve it, but energy, of course, use will increase. But the issue is how to decouple energy demand growth, which should happen to make economic growth possible, but to decouple CO2 emission and growth, economic growth. The next slide is the answer. First, the top line is the business as usual CO2 emission. The bottom line is the so-called blue map scenario, which is aiming at halving the CO2. The best technologies, maybe many of you know that, is energy efficiency. It is most cost effective, even you can gain by investing in energy efficiency. So 38% of the necessary reduction should happen in energy efficiency. Then we have to decarbonize the zero carbon power sector, decarbonizing the power sector, either by CCS, carbon capturing and storage, 19%, renewable energy, 17%, and nuclear power, 6%. But that's not still enough. We have to decarbonize the transportation sector, using the decarbonized electricity, electric vehicle, or plug-in hybrid, or fuel cell hydrogen vehicles. These new advanced vehicle is necessary, and that is the most costly part of the deployment. Next chart is where these reductions should happen. 2/3 of the reduction should happen in non-OECD countries. China, 23%, India, 12%. Of course, this does not mean who should pay for this reduction. Certainly, the developed economy should put the money or transfer the money for this happen, but this shows the opportunity. Because economic growth happens in these developing economies, it's inevitable that reduction must happen there. How can we make it happen? By technology transfer or financial transfer? That is the difficult political issue. Next slide shows what would happen if this 450 or blue map scenario happens in these primary changes in the primary energy demand. The left-hand side is the current level. The red is business as usual, and blue is a blue map scenario. Fossil fuel should definitely decline, of course, but coal is typical one. If nothing happens, coal expand dramatically, more than double. But it should reduce 36%. Oil consumption must be reduced by about 27% from now. And gas, this is interesting. Natural gas is very important sources to reduce CO2 emission because it's relatively clean. So North America and the United States, thanks to the so-called non-conventional gas shales, lots of new potential for cheap gas is available. So the power sector is moving away from coal to gas. But yes, this is very important as a bridging sources, but toward 2050, globally the use of gas should decline. Otherwise, CO2 emission reduction is very difficult. Gas is not the final solution. Unfortunately, we have to move to nuclear, hydro, renewables, biomass. All these zero carbon sources is necessary. By the way, even with this very dramatic change, the fossil fuel dependency is still 46% in 2050. This is surprising. Currently it's 81%, but still we have to depend on 50% on the fossil fuel in 2050, even revolution happens. So this clearly means that we need to invest into the fossil fuel still, continuously, in the coal, in the oil, in the gas, in the non-conventional oil sources, non-conventional gas sources, oil sand, gas shale. Wherever possible, we have to keep on investing. Otherwise, our future is very, very challenging. Why? Next chart. This is the price assumption of the oil. When the business as usual happens, no government policy is taken, the oil price will move up to $120 per barrel as a real price, 2008 price. Nominal price is much, much higher, of course. If 450 or blue map scenario should happen, it should go down, it's go up to about $90, but going down toward $70 per barrel of oil. Because demand is lower. I said 27% less demand, so certainly price, producer price, will decline. But it's only producer price. Because in 2050, our model tells us that carbon price, which is necessary to make these efficiency gains or renewable energies or nuclear happen, the carbon price is $175 per ton of the CO2. This is the additional price on oil, in a sense. It converted to about $73 per barrel of oil. So yes, producer price is $70, but consumer price is $140-some. So whichever the scenario, the oil price is getting higher. Otherwise, this CO2 emission halving is simply impossible. So the difference in two scenarios is who takes the rent? Is it oil-producing countries or a consuming country? So from our viewpoint, it's obvious which is our choice. For the consuming country, we should take that rent and invest this rent to the renewable energy, energy efficiency, carbon capturing and storage, or nuclear power. And you can create the jobs there. So this is a choice. And we think the choice must be obvious. But this is most difficult politically to convince the politician to accept higher prices of energy, higher prices of gasoline. Gasoline tax issue is most politically sensitive issue here. We know that. But we are now start saying that cheap energy age is simply over. We grow very quickly on the combustion engine, internal combustion engine, and cheap oil. This is the 20th century. In the 21st century, we must live on a different paradigm. high energy prices. And how can you adjust yourself to the system, the business or country this is a mega competition. Whichever the country or company who establish the new business model or new paradigm will win. This is a very interesting mega competition which is happening now. Next slide. This is the power sector portfolio. The two scenarios on the left is baseline. When government is not taking serious action, major part of the power comes from fossil fuel, coal, gas, etc. We prepare 3 different scenarios on the right-hand side. The blue map is half of the power sector be supplied by renewable energy, solar, wind, biomass, hydro, and a quarter by nuclear, and the other quarter by mainly carbon capturing and storage. Of course, if carbon capturing and storage is not readily available, we could have more nuclear, 38% nuclear, and in that case, nuclear is cheaper than the renewables or CCS, so the cost is 10% less compared to the blue map. High nuclear scenario is electricity cost is 10% less. We could have higher renewables, 75% comes from renewables. In this case, we have 10% more cost. So yes, renewable is very good sources, but you have to make more investment in smart grid or storage of electricity or demand side management. So it's more costly. Of course, you can choose costly, but again here, the cheap energy or electricity age is over. You have to pay more for cleaner electricity. Next chart is more striking. To achieve this 450 or blue map scenario, how many more energy infrastructure is necessary to be built? We have to build like 50 CCS plants every year. It's not yet come as a proven technology. We have to build 30 nuclear power plants every year from now to 2050. We are building only 1 or 2 every year now. Can we do 30? Historically, yes, we did sometime before Chernobyl, we built more than 30 nuclear reactors historically. So it's not impossible, but it's challenging. We have to build about 16,000 windmills every year. We have to build solar CSP, concentrating solar power plants, 55 CSP power plants. So these are all and. It's not or, alternative. We have to build all of these things every year to achieve this blue map scenario. So, so we are always asked, Mr. Tanaka, IEA is so optimistic about what you are telling the future. But we are saying, no. We are not forecasting what would happen in the future. We are backcasting. If we have to reduce CO2 emission by half in 2050, just backcast what we should do now. So if you see this as a backcasting, maybe it seems much more pessimistic. And this is a reality check from our organization to the climate change negotiators. Are we ready to engage ourselves this level of investment? Can we really deliver this? Otherwise, simply talking about the target of CO2 emission reduction, we can go nowhere. It is scientific fiction. We have developed several roadmaps, technology roadmaps. This is wind. Yes, currently it's European, let's say, Europe has plenty of wind mills, and also US is coming. But major increase should happen in China, for example, and other developing economies. And as a whole, the wind can provide about 12% of the electricity toward 2050. We are sometimes criticized this prospect is too low. The windmill makers say we can do much more. Yes, that's fine. If it can be done more, we can have less nuclear, we can have less CCS. So we wish to be wrong. But yes, wind has huge, of course, potential. Next chart. This is the photovoltaic roadmap we have developed recently. Yes, currently, it's still photovoltaic is very expensive, but toward 2020, maybe residential use of photovoltaic could be grid parity vis-a-vis retail electricity price. In a utility, the more mega use of photovoltaic, maybe it takes a little more time of application and larger deployment, and probably parity will happen around 2030. But certainly at this moment, we need good incentives like feed-in tariffs to make this kind of technology happen. But gradually of the technology development, they are coming to the parity. Because as you see the two lines moving up, this is the general cost of retail or wholesale electricity. It's getting higher and higher anyway. So the parity will happen in the future. Next chart is the very interesting data which we had recently accumulated by electric vehicle or hybrid. This is, we calculated the number which the many countries has announced or companies has announced. China, US, Japan, Korea, France. In 2020, already 7 million new vehicles like this will be on the market. But in fact, in our blue map scenario, we have to see about 1 billion vehicles on the road as a stock in 2050. So we need much, much more electric vehicles on the street. Next chart is the trends where, how the conventional gasoline engine is going to be replaced by other technologies. As a new car, there are quite a limited number of the sales be expected or should be expected. Otherwise, it's very difficult to reduce CO2 emission again, replaced by plug-in hybrid, electric vehicle, or fuel cell vehicle. We don't know which technology will win eventually. So we just put about a third each for a possible future. But certainly fuel cell is more costly for hydrogen deployment or platforms for the hydrogen. So electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid could be the good option. Next slide. This is the smart grid. What kind of benefit we can get from smart grid? Direct CO2 savings or indirect savings. It's 1 or 2 gigaton of the savings is probably possible from smart grid. Smart grid is necessary to use more renewables. Of this volatile nature of the renewables, we need new technologies and designs. Next slide, please. This is the calculating the benefits of this investment. We need, the left-hand side, we need 46 trillion US dollars of investment from now to 2050, additional investment. But the benefit is the downside. $112 trillion could be saved as a non-used fuel. And mainly it happens in the transportation sector. The investment is also the case. More than half of the investment is purchasing new type of vehicle. So not in the nuclear power plant or windmills, but it's how to invest into the new type of vehicle is the major investment. And the benefits also comes to that segment. But important thing is, yes, benefit comes gradually every year after the investment. So how to finance this future flow of the benefits into one initial investment? This is the challenge. Next slide, please. This is the co-benefits chart. As you see the many greens, compared to the right-hand side most, it is a benefit of CO2 emission reduction by the different technology compared to the coal, ultra supercritical technologies. In many of the new technologies is friendly to the environment, friendly to the water usage, etc. So, but we have to watch carefully of these co-benefits in analyzing the different technologies. That it says. Next chart, please. And let's see the regional configuration or regional differences. I talked about all global numbers, but we can analyze 4 different regions. One is US, Europe, and China and India, because all these countries has a different pattern or different policies. United States, yes, as a business usual line, I mean, the CO2 emission will not increase very much, but US must reduce dramatically from the current level to 2050. Even US must reduce by 81% from now to 2050, while Europe should reduce 74%. China will increase toward 2020, but reduce gradually by 30% compared to the current level. On the other hand, India can still grow by 10% in 2050, because depending on the different stage of the economic growth, the different level of burden sharing of CO2 emission reduction in our calculation. But per capita basis, this is interesting. Per capita emission of the United States is very high, but it should go down very quickly to 2050 toward the almost similar level in different countries. So the challenge here is how can we really incentivize the lifestyle change and reduce this much of the per capita emission. China, yes, certainly it may have a very high per capita, but with new technologies, China may come into a new paradigm. It has a huge opportunity with the new emerging economies of experimenting and introducing new technologies, new lifestyle, and lead the world. And we know that, for example, China is the most serious country investing into the electric vehicle. It has a very ambitious target of energy efficiency and achieving it. So, yes, China is currently the largest CO2 emitter as a one country, and almost largest energy user now, almost close to the United States. So without Chinese effort, nothing can be done. That is true. But at the same time, it provides China a huge opportunity of leading the cleaning up or new green paradigm. Let's move quickly to the comparison of the fuel demand. Just in all countries, yes, the fossil fuel consumption must be reduced, especially in US, Europe. But for China, yes, oil consumption from current level, it should increase. I mean, this shows how significant the Chinese fuel use look like compared to the other region. Yes, oil increase or gas must increase much more. Currently, there is a gas glut because of the new non-conventional gas from the United States, and LNG facilities is readily available. So there are gas glut, and gas prices is very low now. But if China starts importing LNGs, this glut will disappear quickly. So gas is certainly very important bridge technology, but it depends how China starts using gas. Next, this is the comparison of the power generation. In the right-hand side is the blue map scenario. And depending on country, this portfolio is different. US must use much more nuclear power, and wind bio is also important. Europe is using lots of the renewable energy. China, India, also it's very important to use CCS, carbon and capturing. Otherwise, it's very difficult. India is promising in a more solar power. So each region, depending on this endowment of the different resources, the different portfolio is envisaged. Next slide, please. This is the industry sector. In the United States, Europe, about 2/3 reduction in the industrial CO2 emission. US, the same thing. While China, about 20% reduction. India, in Indian case, India should continue to grow, so the CO2 emission may double even in this blue map scenario. But efficiency, fuel switch, or carbon capturing and storage is the answer in the industrial sector to reduce CO2 emission. Next slide, please. This is housing. Major part in the housing sector, building sector, the decarbonizing power sector may help. But otherwise, yes, more efficient appliances or building installations, depending on a different country, different option we show in the building sector. But building sector is certainly very important for CO2 emission reduction. Next is vehicle. The United States is currently, already China exceeds the vehicle sales, and India will surpass the US around 2030. And you can see which kind of vehicles it should happen. Combustion engine vehicle will disappear as a new car, but it could be replaced by the hybrid, electric vehicle, fuel cell. Yes, huge business opportunities, but at a challenge for the government to facilitate these changes, because infrastructure of electricity or hydrogen, this is the very interesting policy issues. Can one country has a different system? This is another interesting case. Next. This is the message about technology policies. Carbon pricing is important, but it cannot solve everything by itself. We need other complemented technology policies. And we have to design carefully these policies up to the level of maturity of the technology. Public R&D still must be double. The government should, use the standard for the fuels and efficiency. There are lots of, government roles in making this happen. Next slide, you can see clearly that we say that depending on the technology, we have to design carefully the technology policy. When it is a premature technology, yes, government R&D grant or subsidy is necessary, but when it comes up to the ladder, yes, less interventionist approach is necessary. Maybe feed-in tariffs at the beginning, but feed-in premiums or tradable green certificates. In the end, just carbon pricing may work, but we have to have different mechanisms for the different technology development stages. That's what this slide shows. Next, this is final one. At the beginning I said, do we see the changes? Yes, we are seeing the changes, the green shoots we say. In 2009, the photovoltaic, about 6 gigawatts of photovoltaic was installed. We see, as I said, 7 million hybrids or electric vehicles are coming by 2020, or large-scale CCS projects are moving. 80 of them we have identified. Incandescent lighting bulbs phase out is happening, or government funding is increasing. But this is not enough. To make this blue map scenario happen, we need, for example, 46 gigawatts of the photovoltaic by 2050. We need over 1 billion plug-in and electric vehicle by 2050. We need 3,000 CCS projects by 2050. The LED must dominate the lighting market. The government funding must be double or 5 times more than the current level. So much, much more we have to do to make this energy revolution or historic transition to make reality. And I was invited to just recently to the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting took place in Washington, and my final message is, yes, we are observing the historic transition already, but that's not enough. The government and private sector can do a lot, and engaging these non-member countries is also very important. In Cancun, we will have a very important COP16 meeting, but we should not wait for the global deal, climate deal, because we know what to do, and we have to do it. Otherwise, if we delay these measures, the cost of inaction or delay of by 1 year is additional $500 billion to go back to the trajectory. So act now, do that things what you think is necessary. Each country can contribute action. And that is the message, and I'm very happy here today with many of the faculty, many of the students here. And especially, I'm very happy that Mr. Pino told me that many young people are now interested in energy sector. Energy sector used to be that dark and black and dirty, and nobody is interested. But now we are part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanaka. Before asking for some questions, I would like to thank the words of Dean Cosworth. I mean, this initiative, it's your merit. Exactly 1 year ago, we spoke for the first time, and you had the vision and the leadership to make this possible, and I thank you very much. We could not have someone better than Mr. Tanaka to inaugurate this lecture. Mr. Tanaka has been one of the world leaders in energy. He is doing a fantastic job at the International Energy Agency, and at least my students will have many opportunities to see what the agency is producing in terms of leadership. We have two alternatives. Either we don't do anything, and we know what will happen in terms of energy security and CO2 emissions, or we take a task which is extremely difficult, but probably there's no alternative to that. And now I would like you to take your questions, please.
Microphone in the middle of the room. It would be easier for us if you could step there, just make a line. Just catch you on video.
It's my pleasure to ask Ms. Tanaka this question. In your latest slides, you mentioned carbon pricing policy should be implemented with other policies. So my first question is, what are those other policies? The second question is, without money transferred from the carbon credits market, what are the other other sources of this massive investment to renewable energy. Are we expecting to another stimulus package? This is my two questions. Thank you.
Yes. Other policies means that carbon price is a very important part of the necessary incentives. But as I said, when the technology is primitive, it cannot really make the changes. So the government can use R&D support measures into the new technologies, or not the carbon prices, but some incentives, or for example, for the efficiency part, the government can set the standard of fuel economy standard. Is interesting. Is a very important one. So the government can force the private sector to take these standards, and there is an implicit price of carbon happens by doing so. So the government can do a lot, depending on the sector, depending on the technology. You can develop many other things. And on top of that carbon price, especially this carbon price is useful to covering the power sector, maybe industry, part of the very carbon intensive industry. But for the renewables, yes, it is very important, but at the beginning we need some more. Yes, the stimulus package was a very important step to put some money into the renewables. So we appreciate the Green New Deal policies in many countries. We calculated these impacts, and but stimulus package is only one time. So we have to say that we have to continue these investment in the renewables by the government as a seed money, and also try to make certain framework to make private money moving into this segment. And continuous effort is really necessary. Otherwise, just investment will not happen. The nuclear is a typical case. If government change policy in favor of nuclear and not favorable, on and off policy, then no investment happens. So predictability for the certain period of time, transparent mechanisms, gradually phasing out these measures. This is not sustainable if it continue forever. So government should set these incentives in a very transparent and predictable manner. Otherwise, investment will not happen.
My name is Ali Asheri. I'm from SIPA Energy Association. Thank you for delivering this wonderful speech. I have two questions. The first is with regard to China, which is the biggest, I guess, the most important subject when it comes to energy future. Mr. Tanaka, we might remember that you promised that you want to engage China more into IEA, and I want to know at this point what's your commitment toward that promise, and how is that going to be without the work frame of OECD? My second question is a bit technical, but I really feel curious about is the limitation we might have on carbon sequestration. We know that carbon sequestration is meant to inject back CO2 into the ground, and we know that most of the CO2 will be produced in the consuming countries, while the CO2 can be only injected or will be limited to, sequestration will be limited to with geophysical constraints.
I see.
My question is how is the technical feasibility of CO2 transportation, and how you evaluate this in your organization? Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the second question first, yes, CCS is certainly, the issue is that already there's a technology of capturing CO2, but how to store it is another story. Yes, storage, certainly we need to need certain legal framework if the leakage happens, or we need more demonstration plants that the leakage can be avoidable. Yes, geological structure is necessary, but it's not only consuming country, because many of the gas producing countries use enhanced oil recovery. I mean, using CO2 pushing into the oil field or gas field to increase pressure and getting gas or oil out. So already this technology is used in some of the producers. So transportation, even I understand that in some countries interested in transporting CO2 back from the consumer country and sell it to the producer country to use in enhanced oil recovery, if there's high enough carbon prices. It could be an interesting business model. The liquid natural gas is now transported from producer to the users. On the way back, this empty LNG vessel could be used to move the CO2 from consumer to the producer. So that is the new technology, new business models. China, yes, we have been engaging China in many activities in the IEA already. They came to many of the meetings, ministerial meeting. We have the joint statement and work closely on the statistics. We have already every month or two, we have the statistician came to IEA and Chinese statistician learning about the energy statistics. This is very basics, but fundamentally important to have a comparable statistics. And they finally decide to send the policy staff to work with us as a secondee. So it is moving toward the future, let's say, engagement. Certainly, to be a member to the IEA, current, let's say, statutory agreement requires the membership to OECD. China is not interested in member in the OECD, so to make China as a full member, certainly we have some legal and diplomatic challenges from in our side also. But as I said, to maintain the IEA, the relevant energy security player, we need to have much closer tie with China or India or these emerging economies, and this is moving step by step.
My name is Bogdan Vasi, and I'm assistant professor in the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. I just have a technical question. You showed us a graph that showed the growth of the wind energy industry, and which I believe was 12%, reach about 12% by 2050. Mm-hmm. And as you know, a major obstacle for renewables and wind in particular is the power infrastructure, in particular the development of high voltage direct current power lines and infrastructure. So I was wondering if you have any examples of where you see positive signs, and if you see if you're hopeful that this energy infrastructure will change at the pace that is needed.
Okay. We have analyzed the cost of this renewable energy or electricity as a whole, and certainly onshore wind is promising. In many countries already in Europe, the wind is providing quite substantial part of the electricity under the mechanism like feed-in tariffs. And 12% number is relatively modest. In renewable high scenario, this number is about 25%, so it could be as high as 25. Yes, and also very interesting development in Europe is that there is a project called Desert Tech, or it is sometimes called Pan-Mediterranean Grid project. Portugal is a very active player, France, Spain, Germany. the idea is building, concentrating solar power plant. It's solar thermal plants in the North Africa because they are so rich in the direct light. So connecting these solar to the Europe through the high voltage direct current grid, or even there are some idea of superconductivity grid lines, because superconductivity grid is zero loss. So with this new technology in the grid, the North Africa will be connected to Africa, to Europe. And Europe needs about, I remember, 5 terawatt hour of importation to make this, let's say, bloom up scenario possible. So yes, it's a huge challenge for investing in this infrastructure, but Europe is very serious about, it's getting more and more serious about these investments.
So we would take now the last question.
Mr. Tanaka, thank you. You said today that because of unconventional gas plays that the market is well supplied, and you previously said the same thing about oil. How soon, because it seems to me that if you're going to get any real action among politicians, it's going to take a supply constraint. So how soon, how far do you have to go out before these supplies get eaten up, the excess supply that is, and it actually prices start going up again because of the supply side?
Oh, you mean peak oil thing?
Not necessarily peak oil, but how soon are we no longer talking about excess gas and oil? And how soon is it a constraint again? Thank you.
If we consider the non-conventional gas or non-conventional oil, it is, we think, I mean, we don't have to worry about peak oil or peak gas, because if we have enough money and if we don't worry too much about price level, there are plenty of resources underground. The problem is above ground. Some countries limit access of international oil gas companies to the resources. The technology cannot be deployed. We may not have enough investment, and price volatility hinders investment. So we think we have enough non-conventional sources, but these sources are costly because it's more, could be deep sea, it could be more difficult place in like Arctic. It is more new technologies for shale gas, shale oil, or oil sands. So these non-conventional sources are more expensive. So inevitably, regardless of peak oil or peak gas, we may have the sources, but more costly, more expensive. Our scenario, this bloom up scenario, is not the peak oil scenario or peak gas scenario. It is demand peak scenario. So how can we make demand peak happen earlier than the supply peak? That is this bloom up scenario means. And we can postpone or extend the future possibility of peak oil happening into the long-term future. So that is what this scenario means. So that again means a very climate change oriented, but energy security, more energy secured scenario. So as I said, yes, to convince the people invest into these actions. We know we need to have these actions, but climate change argument is to do something for somebody else. Energy security is to do same things for your own sake, for yourselves. So this is much more politically acceptable argument in the United States, in Europe, or in China, for everybody. So there comes the reason why IEA, our organization, can play a role in these discussions. Our role is energy security, and we provide data, analysis, arguments into the public domain. So that is the current, let's say, mission, and I'm very happy to be with all of you today.
I want to conclude by inviting you all to a reception in honor of our visitor, Mr. Tanaka, and Professor Pino, which will take place right outside this room. But before doing so, I guess I've already done it. I want to thank our distinguished visitor for his wonderful talk and for his responsive answers to very tough questions. Thank you.